Lily had always loved old bookstores. There was something magical about the scent of aged paper, the quiet rustling of pages, and the promise of forgotten stories hidden between the covers. That's why, on her first week in Paris, she found herself wandering into a small, tucked away bookshop near the Seine. The shop was dimly lit, with wooden shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, overflowing with books in French and English. She ran her fingers along the spines, savoring the feel of history at her fingertips. Her eyes caught a familiar title, Pride and Prejudice. Smiling, she pulled it from the shelf and flipped through the pages. That's when something fluttered to the ground. A yellowed envelope, delicate with age, lay at her feet. Carefully, she picked it up and turned it over. There was no name, no address, just elegant handwriting in faded ink. Curious, she opened it and unfolded the fragile piece of paper inside. The words were written in both French and English. My love, I will wait for you at the old bridge at sunset. Lily's heart skipped a beat. Who had written this? And more importantly, had the letter ever reached its intended recipient? She glanced toward the counter where a young man was stacking books. Maybe he could help. Taking a deep breath, she walked over. Lily hesitated for a moment before approaching the counter. The young man arranging books looked up, his dark eyes warm with curiosity. He had slightly tousled hair and an air of quiet confidence, as if he belonged among the books as much as they did in his hands. Excuse me, Lily said carefully, hoping he understood English. I found this inside a book. Do you know anything about it? The man set down the book he was holding and took the letter from her hands, his eyebrows raising slightly as he unfolded it. His gaze moved over the faded ink, and he let out a soft chuckle. Ah, you any letter d'amour? He murmured. A love letter. Lily nodded, feeling an unexpected rush of excitement. Yes, but who wrote it? And why was it inside the book? The bookseller looked thoughtful. This book, he gestured toward Pride and Prejudice in her hands, came from an old collection. Many people sell or donate books here, but this letter, he tapped the paper lightly. It looks much older. Lily's curiosity deepened. Can you read the French parts? I don't understand everything, he smiled, amused. You do not speak French? Not very well, she admitted. Then, he said, folding the letter carefully, we will help each other. I read the French. You read the English. Deal? Lily grinned. Deal. Lily and the bookseller, whose name, she soon learned, was Etienne sat at a small wooden table in the corner of the bookstore. The letter lay between them, its faded ink whispering of a past neither of them knew, but were both eager to uncover. Etienne adjusted his reading glasses and pointed to the first line written in French. Ma chérie, je t'attendrai au vieux pont au coucher du soleil. My love, I will wait for you at the old bridge at sunset. Lily translated aloud, her voice soft. She glanced up. It sounds so romantic, Etienne smirked. It does. But also mysterious. Which bridge? And did they meet? Lily traced the delicate cursive with her fingertips. There must be more clues. Maybe the letter was part of a book donation, like you said. Etienne nodded, perhaps. But this letter looks much older than the book you found it in. He leaned back, thoughtful. Wait here. He disappeared behind a tall bookshelf and returned moments later, holding a worn leather journal. He set it down carefully and flipped through the pages. What's that? Lily asked, intrigued. An old diary, Etienne explained. It belonged to a woman who lived in Paris decades ago. Sometimes customers sell us personal collections. Lily's pulse quickened. Do you think? Etienne stopped on a page. His eyes scanned the words, then he looked up. Her name was Isabel, and she wrote about meeting someone at the old bridge. But she never finished her story. Lily's breath caught. So the letter was never delivered? Etienne tapped the paper. his expression serious but filled with intrigue. It seems that way. The question is why? Lily leaned in closer, her excitement growing. She had come to this bookstore to find a good story, and now she was in the middle of one. Then let's find out. Etienne smiled. I like the way you think. Lily and Etienne stepped out of the bookstore, the letter carefully folded inside her pocket. The Parisian air was crisp, carrying the distant scent of fresh bread from a nearby boulangerie. The streets were alive with people, but to Lily, the city now felt like the pages of a novel one she was desperate to finish. So, where do we start? She asked, falling into step beside Etienne. He glanced at her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. The letter mentions an old bridge. There are many in Paris, but if this was written decades ago, it must be one of the historic ones. Lily thought for a moment. The Pont Neuf? Etienne nodded. A good guess. It's the oldest standing bridge in Paris, and it was a popular meeting place for lovers back then. They walked together along the Seine, the river glistening under the afternoon sun. As they approached the Pont Neuf, Etienne slowed his pace. Imagine, he said, gesturing toward the bridge. A woman standing here at sunset, letter in hand, waiting for someone who may never arrive. Lily shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of the story they were unraveling. Do you think she was heartbroken? She asked softly. Etienne exhaled. Maybe, or maybe something stopped them from meeting. Lily glanced around, scanning the bridge for any signs of the past. If Isabel wrote about the meeting, maybe she left more behind. A journal entry, another letter, something that tells us what happened next. Etienne nodded, impressed. You're thinking like a detective now. Lily grinned. Well, mysteries are easier to solve in English. He laughed. Then you teach me English and I help you uncover the past. Fair trade? Fair trade, Lily agreed. But deep down, she knew this was more than just a story. There was something about this journey, about Etienne, about Paris, about the way her heart raced with every new discovery that made her feel like she was living in a love story of her own. The golden light of the setting sun bathed the Pont Neuf in a warm glow as Lily and Etienne stood at the bridge's edge, the letter still safely tucked in her pocket. The city around them moved at its usual rhythm, lovers strolling hand in hand. Musicians playing soft melodies and the distant hum of conversations floating on the evening air. Yet for Lily, everything felt suspended in time. So what now? She asked, watching the rippling water below. Etienne ran a hand through his hair, thinking. If the letter was never delivered, maybe Isabel wrote something else about that night. We need to go back to the bookstore. Just as they turned to leave, a voice behind them called out, Excusez-moi. An elderly woman stood nearby, her gray eyes sharp with recognition as she looked at Lily. That letter, she murmured in French, pointing to Lily's pocket. Lily and Etienne exchanged a surprised glance. You recognize it? Etienne asked in French, stepping forward. The woman nodded slowly, her gaze distant. Isabel was my aunt. She spoke of a love she lost long ago, a man she was supposed to meet here on this bridge, but he never came. Lily's heart pounded. Why not? What happened? The woman sighed. He was sent away, drafted into the war just days before their meeting. He wrote back to her, but the letter was lost. She thought he had abandoned her. The chill ran through Lily. But this letter, she pulled it out, her hands trembling. It was meant for him. The woman's eyes softened. Then he never saw it. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant murmur of the river. She never knew the truth, Etienne murmured. Lily swallowed hard. But we do, and maybe. It's not too late to finish the story. Etienne turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. What do you mean? Lily took a deep breath. We write a new letter. Back at the bookstore, the soft glow of the old reading lamp cast warm light over the wooden table where Lily and Etienne sat. The letter lay between them, an unfinished story, waiting for its final words. Lily tapped the blank sheet of paper in front of her. "We can't change the past," she said, "but we can give it an ending." Etienne studied her for a moment, then nodded. "So, what should we write?" Lily hesitated, then picked up the pen. "Something simple. Something Isabel might have said if she had known the truth." She wrote in neat, careful letters. "My love, I waited for you. I always did." Etienne read the words aloud, his voice soft. "It's beautiful." Lily exhaled, a strange mix of closure and sadness settling over her. She looked at Etienne, realizing that their time together, this unexpected adventure, had changed something inside her. "You know," she said, smiling, "I think I learned more French today than in any class I've ever taken." Etienne smirked. "And I learned more English than I ever expected to in one afternoon." They laughed, the air between them lighter now. As they folded the letter and placed it carefully inside the diary, Etienne reached for Lily's hand. "Maybe," he said, "some stories aren't meant to stay in the past." Lily met his gaze and smiled. "Maybe not." If you've watched this far, leave a like and subscribe to follow more.